Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. I took the job after 6 full months of unemployment. By that point, I wasn't being picky anymore. The job search had been brutal. It wasn't because I was completely unqualified. I had a bachelor's degree in communications, decent grades, and enough experience to make my Ursum look respectable at first glance. The problem was what happened when employers looked a little closer. I had never managed to stay anywhere for very long. A year was good for me. 2 years was practically a miracle. A few jobs had lasted only 3 months before I was let go, replaced, downsized, or quietly encouraged to look for something else. Nothing ever seemed to stick. When I graduated from college, I thought I knew exactly what direction my life was going. I had a plan. I had confidence. I had that stupid belief people have in their early 20s that one good opportunity will lead naturally into another. Instead, one bad job led to another. Then another. After a while, I stopped thinking in terms of a career and started thinking in terms of survival. The job market didn't help. Half the positions I applied for didn't even feel real. Companies would post the same opening for months, reject hundreds of applicants, then repost it the next week. Sometimes I'd spend 40 minutes filling out an application only to receive an automated rejection email 5 minutes later. Ghost jobs, people called them. Listings companies kept online so they could collect ARSMs, look active, or convince investors they were growing. Whatever the reason, they weren't paying my rent. My landlord didn't care that the hiring market was terrible. The electric company didn't care that I'd sent out 50 applications in a week. My bank certainly didn't care. I had maybe 1 month left before things became serious. Then I saw the listing. Talent Acquisition Agency. That was the entire company name. The job paid $25 an hour. No experience necessary. Full-time. Benefits after 90 days. The description barely explained what the actual position involved. There were working hours, a vague reference to customer support, and then a company statement that looked like it had been designed by a committee of people terrified of saying anything meaningful. We believe every individual has the potential to shape tomorrow. Our mission is to connect ambition with opportunity through innovative, people-first solutions that create meaningful growth for candidates, clients, and communities. I nearly closed the page. It sounded fake. Actually, it sounded worse than fake. It sounded like the sort of business that sold online courses about how to become rich selling online courses. But desperation does strange things to your standards. I sent them my Ursum. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. A woman asked whether I could attend an in-person orientation the following morning. I thought I'd misheard her. In person? Yes, Mr. Parker. Where? She gave me an address. It was in my own city. That confused me more than anything. I had never heard of Talent Acquisition Agency. I searched the company name online and found almost nothing except the same job listings I'd already seen. No meaningful reviews, no employee profiles, No local news stories. No photos of the office. Still, the address existed. The next morning, I drove over, and there it was, a huge white warehouse sitting behind a chain-link fence. 3 black letters were painted across the side. Ta. I sat in my car for a minute, staring at the building. I'd grown up in that city. I had driven through that industrial area hundreds of times, maybe thousands. I could have sworn there had never been a warehouse there before, but obviously there was one now, and I needed money. So I went inside. Orientation took place in a windowless conference room. There were only 3 new employees, including me, despite the fact that someone had arranged about 100 folding chairs in neat rows facing a projector screen. Before security allowed us into the room, a woman introduced herself as Miss Roll. She had a short bob haircut, a curvy build, and a voice that made every sentence sound like an instruction, even when she was being polite. She stood beside a table covered with masks. Not medical masks, not safety equipment. Doll masks. Each one was made of pale plastic with a painted smile and 2 empty eye holes. For a moment, none of us moved. I thought maybe it was some strange company icebreaker. Then Miss Roll picked one up and handed it to me. Please put this on before entering. I laughed slightly. She didn't. Behind her, a security guard watched me. Is this part of orientation? I asked. The mask is required at all times while on company property. I looked at the other 2 new employees. They seemed just as confused. One of them shrugged and put his mask on. I did the same. The plastic pressed against my cheeks and smelled faintly chemical, like a new shower curtain. Security opened the doors. We entered. I took a seat near the middle of the room. The projector turned on. A man appeared on the screen. He was wearing a gray suit that didn't fit properly. The shoulders were too wide, while the sleeves looked too short. He introduced himself as Mr. Rock, the company's CEO. Are we ready to get started? He asked enthusiastically. The 3 of us looked at one another. Mr. Rock continued as though a stadium full of people had shouted yes. The video became a long speech about values, commitment, innovation, customers, loyalty, excellence, growth, and several other words that had probably been repeated in corporate meetings since the invention of the photocopier. Every few minutes, a message appeared across the screen. Remember, our product is first in class. No substitution will do. Then another. Remember, we don't believe customers can make mistakes. Then, remember, think different. Shape the future. I still had no idea what the company actually sold. I kept expecting that part to come. It never did. The video went on forever. The room was warm. The plastic mask trapped heat against my face. The edges rubbed my skin. At some point, my eyelids started getting heavy. Then something slapped my thigh. Hard, I jumped awake. Ms. Roll stood beside me, holding a fly swatter. Miss Parker, she said, please follow me. I rubbed my leg and stood. Apparently, orientation was over. Ms. Roll led me through a pair of iron doors and into the warehouse. The place was enormous. Conveyor belts stretched across the floor in long lines. Cardboard boxes of different sizes moved from one end of the warehouse to the other. Some were tiny. Others were large enough to fit a refrigerator. I never saw anyone packing them. I never saw anyone opening them either. The only worker on the warehouse floor was a short, heavy man wearing a red, hard hat. He stood near one of the conveyor belts, watching boxes move past. Miss Roll didn't introduce us. We kept walking. I still didn't know what the product was. At that point, I assumed the orientation video had explained it while I was drifting off. I was too embarrassed to ask. Eventually, we entered another enormous room. This one was packed with cubicles. Hundreds of them, maybe more. Rows stretched so far into the distance that the room seemed larger than the warehouse itself. "This is the call center," Miss Roll said. Apparently, this was where I would be working. She led me to a cubicle. There was a desk, a chair, a computer, a notepad, several mechanical pencils, and a telephone. The computer had almost nothing installed on it. There was a basic text editor. Solitaire, that was about it. The phone was even simpler. It had two large buttons. Transfer, hold, Miss Roll gestured toward the desk. "You'll get the hang of it quickly." Then she disappeared into the rows of cubicles before I could ask what exactly I was supposed to get the hang of. I sat there for about 20 minutes. Nobody approached me. Nobody gave me instructions. Nobody explained how the phone system worked. I clicked around the computer, trying to look busy. Eventually, I opened Solitaire. I had been playing for maybe 30 seconds when the phone rang. I froze. Then I picked it up. "Hello?" A man's voice answered. "Hello?" "Hi there," I said. "Is this acquisitions?" I looked around the room. There were no signs, no department names, no reference material, nothing, I believe so. Thank God. I was hoping I could talk to someone about landing a job. I sat up straighter. Finally, something I understood. "Could you hold for 1 second?" The man made an irritated sound. I pressed hold. Then I stood and looked for Miss Roll. I couldn't see her anywhere. Everyone around me wore the same blank doll masks. I couldn't even tell who was a supervisor and who was another employee. After a few seconds, I sat back down and took the call off hold. "Sir, are you still there?" "Pretty sure I am." "Okay, thank you." "Listen, I'm new here, and I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not entirely sure how to help. My boss isn't around, and this is acquisitions, right?" I hesitated. "Yes?" "Then I'd like to inquire about a fucking job." His voice changed so suddenly that I pulled the phone away from my ear. "I'm not sure how to help with that." "I haven't been, you stupid slut. Who do you think you are?" I stopped breathing for a second. The caller's voice rose into a scream. "I'll find you. Do you hear me? I'll kill your whole fucking." I hung up. My hands were shaking. Then I noticed someone standing behind me. Ms. Roll, her arms were crossed. I couldn't see her face because of the mask, but the skin on her neck had turned red. "What was that?" she asked. "I don't know. I honestly don't know. He just started screaming, and I wasn't. Do you see your phone?" I looked at it. "Yes. Do you see the two large buttons?" "Yes. If you don't know how to help a customer, press transfer. We covered this during training." "Training? Did she mean that 2-hour video? The one about thinking differently and shaping tomorrow?" I opened my mouth, but decided against arguing. Miss Roll was already walking away. "You seem tense, Mr. Parker," she said. "Take a 5-minute water break." I didn't need to be told twice. I headed toward the break area. A water cooler stood near the wall. Another employee was already there. He wore black slacks, a button-up shirt, and a leather belt. Basically the same outfit as me. His mask looked different, though. It had turned yellow with age. The edges were warped and slightly curled, like he'd been wearing the same one for years. He filled a paper cup with water. Then he lifted it carefully to the narrow opening in the mask's mouth and drank through it. I stared. That seemed ridiculous. I filled my own cup. Then I reached up to lift my mask. The man's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. I nearly dropped the water. "No," he whispered. I pulled back. "What the hell?" No, don't let them see you." He pointed toward the upper corner of the room. A security camera stared directly at us. For some reason, seeing that camera made the mask feel much tighter. I threw the water away. Then I returned to my cubicle. The calls kept coming. Most were from people looking for work. The problem was that none of them seemed able to explain what kind of work they wanted. I want a leadership position. I'd really like to work the floor. I'm hoping to join a driven team. I'd ask for details. They'd become vague. I'd ask what experience they had. They'd redirect the conversation. Eventually, I would press transfer. Sometimes people called about the mysterious product. Those calls interested me more. I thought maybe I could finally learn what Ta actually sold. Hi, is this acquisitions? This is. I wanted to make a return. I wasn't satisfied with my product. What wasn't satisfying about it? It wasn't as exciting as I'd hoped. What do you mean? I don't know. It just wasn't very exciting. What exactly did you buy? A pause. The product. Right, but which product? Another pause. Can I return it? I sighed. Hold for 1 second. Then I hit transfer. The line clicked and went dead. I got better at the job eventually. Not because anyone trained me. I simply became better at pretending. I learned how to keep callers talking. I learned which meaningless phrases sounded professional. I understand your concern. That's something our team can definitely look into. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Let me connect you with the appropriate department. It became a game. I started timing how long I could keep a conversation going before I ran out of believable nonsense and had to transfer the caller. My personal record was 5 minutes and 14 seconds. Some callers didn't even want anything. One man asked for career advice. Another read me the first page of a screenplay he'd written. He performed every character's voice. Most calls still involved job placement or the product. But after a while, I stopped caring what any of it meant. The work became routine. Then, the routine became my life. 6 months passed. I stopped going out after work. I didn't have the energy. I would finish a full day of calls, ride the bus home, eat something simple, and collapse into bed. Some nights, I fell asleep without changing my clothes. The mask bothered me less. At first, I had counted the minutes until I could take it off. Then, I stopped noticing it. Sometimes I would get halfway home before realizing I was still wearing it. Once, I rode the entire bus route with a plastic face still strapped over mine. Nobody said anything. That should have bothered me. It didn't. By mid-August, the loudspeaker cracked to life during the afternoon. Mr. Rock's voice filled the call center. He announced that the company was entering its busy season. Mandatory overtime would begin immediately and continue for the next several months. Around me, nobody reacted. No complaints, no groans. People just kept answering phones. Miss Roll appeared beside my cubicle later that day. Pack an extra lunch tomorrow, Miss Parker. How much overtime? Enough, that was all she said. The next day, I worked 16 hours. 16 hours answering calls from people who wanted jobs they couldn't describe and customers unhappy with products they couldn't identify. By the time I finished and took public transit home, almost 20 hours of my day had been dedicated entirely to work. I calculated that I'd be lucky to sleep 4 hours before I had to wake up and do it again. I entered my studio apartment feeling half dead. My shirt stuck to my back. My shoulders hurt. The air inside felt hot and stale. I didn't even turn on the lights. I walked straight into the bathroom. Then I grabbed the mask with both hands and ripped it off. For 6 months, taking that mask off had always brought immediate relief. Cool air against sweaty skin, the release of pressure around my cheeks, the feeling of being myself again. This time I felt nothing. I stood over the sink. I turned on the cold water. Then I splashed it onto my face. Nothing. I did it again. Still nothing. For a second, I thought exhaustion had numbed my skin. I raised my head. The bathroom mirror was directly in front of me. I looked into it, and there was no face. I didn't mean that my features had changed. I didn't mean that my skin was damaged. I mean there was nothing there. Where my face should have been was a dark opening, a hole, perfectly smooth around the edges. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, no skin. Just darkness, depthless darkness. I leaned closer to the mirror. The hole reflected no light. The bathroom bulb should have illuminated something inside it. It didn't. I raised my hand. I touched where my cheek should have been. My fingers disappeared into the darkness. I couldn't feel them touching skin. I couldn't feel anything at all. I pulled my hand back. My fingers were still there. For a long time, I simply stood in front of the mirror. I waited for panic. Surely it was coming. Anyone would panic. I should have screamed. I should have called an ambulance. I should have run into the hallway and begged someone to help me. I should have done something. Instead, I looked at the doll mask lying in the sink. Its painted smile seemed almost familiar. Comforting, even. I picked it up. I turned it over. There was moisture on the inside from 16 hours of sweat. At least I assumed it was sweat. I couldn't remember feeling any of it. I placed the mask back over the hole where my face had been. The straps slid around my head naturally. The moment it was in place, something inside me settled. Not relief, exactly. More like completion. I looked into the mirror again. The pale plastic face stared back at me. 2 dark eye holes. A small, painted smile. Normal, or close enough. I slept for 3 hours and 42 minutes. My alarm went off at 5:30. I got dressed. Black slacks, button-up shirt, leather belt. Then I went into the bathroom. The mask was still on. For a moment, I thought about removing it again. I didn't. There didn't seem to be a reason. I caught the bus to work. Nobody stared. Nobody asked why I was wearing a doll's face before sunrise. When I reached the warehouse, security barely looked at my ID. One guard nodded toward my mask. Good. I didn't ask what he meant. Inside the call center, everything looked exactly the same. Hundreds of cubicles, hundreds of pale faces, hundreds of people answering ringing phones. I sat down. The phone rang immediately. I picked it up. Talent Acquisition Agency. Acquisitions Department. A woman answered. Thank God. I'm calling because I'm looking for work. What kind of position are you interested in? There was a long pause. I don't know, that's okay. I just want something stable. I leaned back in my chair. For some reason, those words sounded familiar. I understand. I've been unemployed for months. I'm sorry to hear that. My bills are piling up. Of course, I'll take almost anything. I looked across the call center. A sea of identical masks faced identical computer screens. Almost anything? I asked. Yes, a small sound came through the phone. Maybe nervous laughter. I mean, within reason. Of course. I reached for my notepad. What experience do you have? Customer service. Some office work. I have a degree. What kind? Communications? My pencil stopped. I stared at the paper. Communications? Yeah, I looked toward the far end of the room. Ms. Roll stood between 2 rows of cubicles. Even from that distance, I could tell she was watching me. Do you have a stable employment history? I asked. The caller hesitated. Not really. How long do you usually stay at a job? A year, maybe 2. My fingers tightened around the pencil. Sometimes less? Yeah, her voice became quieter. A few months, sometimes I said nothing. Is that going to be a problem? Ms. Roll began walking toward me. I could hear her shoes against the floor. Click, 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 Mr. Parker, she said when she reached my desk. I placed the caller on hold. Ms. Roll leaned slightly closer. Transfer the candidate. To where? She tilted her head. It was the first time I had ever asked that question. Recruitment. I thought this was acquisitions. It is. What does acquisitions mean? She stared at me through the eye holes of her mask. Then she tapped one finger against my telephone. Transfer. I looked at the blinking hold light. Who are these people? Customers. Customers buying what? There was a pause. Then Miss Roll laughed. I had never heard her laugh before. It sounded tired. Mr. Parker, you've been here 6 months. I know. And you still don't understand? No. She looked across the call center. That's probably why you're doing so well. Then she walked away. I stared after her. The woman was still waiting on hold. I pressed transfer. The call disappeared. My phone rang again immediately. This time, a man wanted to return his product. It doesn't feel like me, he said. What doesn't? The product. Can you be more specific? It's hard to explain. Try. There was silence. Then he said, I don't recognize myself anymore. My hand moved toward the transfer button, but I stopped. What do you mean? I bought what they recommended. What did they recommend? They said it would help me fit. Fit where? Another pause. At work. My throat should have tightened. At least, I think it should have. I wasn't sure anymore. Sir, what did the product look like? He began crying. Quietly at first. Then harder. I can't take it off. I stared at my computer screen. What? I can't take it off anymore. I raised my hand toward my own mask. My fingers touched cold plastic. Sir, what exactly did you buy? Before he could answer, the line transferred automatically. I hadn't touched the button. I stood up. Ms. Roll was nowhere nearby. I looked across the room. Nobody else reacted. Phones rang. Voices murmured. Keyboards clicked. I sat back down. For the rest of the shift, I stopped trying to extend conversations. I transferred almost everyone immediately. Nobody complained. At lunch, I went to the water cooler. The older employee with the yellowed mask was there again. I hadn't spoken to him in months. He was drinking through the mouth slit. I stood beside him. How long have you worked here? He lowered the cup. Don't know. Years? Probably. What's your name? He looked at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I don't remember. I felt something cold move through my stomach. Do you take the mask off at home? His hand froze. Then he slowly turned toward the security camera. No, why? You know why. I stared at him. When did it happen to you? He crushed the paper cup in his hand. Go back to your desk. What is this place? Go back. What's the product? He grabbed my arm. His voice dropped to a whisper. The mask isn't the product. I stopped breathing. Then what is? He looked directly at me. You are. A speaker clicked above us. Mr. Parker, Mr. Rock's voice. Please return to your station. The older employee released me. I walked back to my cubicle. Slowly, every worker I passed kept facing forward. But something had changed. I could feel them watching me. Not with their eyes. I couldn't even see most of their eyes behind the masks. Still, I knew. I sat down. My phone rang. I answered. Acquisitions A-man's voice came through. I'm interested in applying for a job. I closed my eyes. Do you have experience? No, that's okay. Is the pay really $25 an hour? Yes, and no experience necessary? Correct. Wow, he laughed. I've been applying everywhere for months. I looked toward Miss Roll. She stood at the end of my row. Behind her, 2 security guards waited. Can I ask you something? The caller said. Sure, what exactly does your company do? For the first time in 6 months, I knew the answer. At least part of it. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Not because I didn't know what to say, because beneath the mask, there was no mouth anymore. Still, the caller heard something. Hello? I tried again. Hello? My voice came through the receiver perfectly. Calm, professional, not coming from my throat, not coming from anywhere I could identify. We connect ambition with opportunity, I heard myself say. Ms. Roll nodded. The security guards walked away. The caller laughed. Okay, that's pretty vague. Would you like to schedule an orientation? Already? We have availability tomorrow morning. Wow, yeah, definitely. I opened the text editor on my computer. For the first time since starting the job, there was something written there. An address, a time, a name, the caller's name. I read the details back to him. He thanked me repeatedly. Before hanging up, he said something that stayed with me. You have no idea how much I needed this. The line went dead. I sat there staring at the screen. Then the information disappeared. My phone rang again. Another applicant. Then another. Then another. By the end of the day, I had scheduled 11 orientations. I don't remember learning how. I don't remember being shown where the schedule was. I simply knew. That was 3 weeks ago. I'm still working here. The overtime hasn't ended. I average 14 hours a day now, sometimes 16. I sleep less than 4 hours most nights. Strangely, I don't feel tired anymore. I don't really feel hungry either. I still pack lunches because Miss Roll tells me to, but most days I forget to eat them. The mask fits better now. The edges no longer press against my skin. There isn't any skin underneath for them to press against. I tried taking it off one more time last week. Just once. I wanted to make sure I hadn't imagined what I saw in the mirror. I hadn't. The hole is still there, except now it seems larger. The darkness continues past where my head should end. I held a flashlight toward it. The beam disappeared. No reflection, no bottom, nothing. I put the mask back on. That felt better. I don't take it off anymore. Yesterday, Miss Roll stopped by my cubicle. She placed a red folder on my desk. Congratulations, Mr. Parker, for what? You've been selected for advancement. To what? Recruitment, I stared at the folder. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. People wearing doll masks. Some looked new. Some were yellowed and warped. Several pages showed warehouses in different cities, different states, different countries, all with the same 3 letters painted across the side. Ta, the final page, showed my own city. But the photograph was old, very old. Cars from the 1950s were parked outside the warehouse. 3 letters were painted across the wall. Ta. I looked up at Miss Roll. How long has this company existed? She gave me the same answer the old employee at the water cooler had given. Don't know. What does recruitment do? You've already been doing it. I thought about the 11 people I'd scheduled for orientation. Then the 23 the following week. Then the dozens after that. What's the point? Ms. Roll tilted her head. The same as any company. Growth? Exactly. And the people calling about returns? Her body became very still. What about them? They say they can't remove the product. Customers frequently misunderstand their purchase. But you said the mask isn't the product. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, Miss Roll leaned closer. I never said that. My stomach dropped. The old employee had said it, not her. I turned toward the break room. Where's the guy who works near the water cooler? What guy? The older employee. Yellow mask. There is no employee assigned to that area. I've spoken to him. No, you haven't. I stood. I talked to him yesterday. Miss Roll placed one hand on my shoulder. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Mr. Parker, prolonged employment can occasionally produce adjustment difficulties. Where is he? Sit down. Where is he? The loudspeaker clicked. Mr. Rock's voice filled the room. Remember, we don't believe customers can make mistakes. Every phone in the call center began ringing at once. Hundreds of phones. The noise was deafening. Nobody moved. Then every employee picked up at exactly the same moment. I looked around. Hundreds of masks. Hundreds of identical painted smiles. Hundreds of voices speaking together. Talent acquisition agency. How may I help you? My phone continued ringing. Miss Roll pointed toward it. I sat down. I answered. A young woman was crying on the other end. Hello? Talent acquisition agency. How may I help you? Please, she said. I think something is wrong. What seems to be the problem? I started working there. I didn't move. Where? You know where. Her voice shook. They made me wear the mask. I looked toward Miss Roll. She was gone. When did you start? 4 months ago. Which location? She gave me a city hundreds of miles away. I took it off tonight, she whispered. I already knew what she was going to say. There's nothing under it. The entire call center seemed to become quiet. Not actually quiet. Phones were still ringing. People were still talking. But all of it seemed very far away. What do I do? She asked. I looked at the 2 buttons on my phone. Hold, transfer. 6 months ago, those were the only choices anyone had given me. Now I understood why. There was no button labeled help. No button labeled quit. No button labeled tell the truth. Just delay. Or pass the problem to someone else. What do I do? She asked again. My finger hovered over transfer. I thought about my studio apartment, my unpaid bills, the 6 months of unemployment, the applications, the rejection emails. The day I saw the TA listing and thought $25 an hour sounded too good to be true. It had been. Of course it had. But the worst part was that I wasn't sure anymore whether I cared. I pressed hold. The woman disappeared into silence. Then I stood and walked toward the nearest exit. Security was already waiting there. 2 guards. Neither moved. I stopped several feet away. I want to leave. One guard pointed toward the clock. My shift wasn't over. I'm quitting. No response. I said I'm quitting. The second guard slowly pointed toward my mask, then toward the door. For one stupid second, I thought they were letting me go. I reached for the handle. Locked. Behind me, the loudspeaker clicked. Mister, Rock spoke. Remember. Think different. Shape the future. The guard stepped closer. I backed away. What happens if I refuse? Neither answered. I looked across the call center. Every employee had stopped talking. Every masked face had turned toward me. All at once. I don't remember returning to my desk. But somehow I was sitting there again. The woman was still on hold. I took her off. Are you there? She asked. Yes. What do I do? I stared at the transfer button. Then I said the only thing I could think of. Whatever happens, don't come back tomorrow. There was silence. What? Don't go back to work. A sharp pain exploded through my neck. His roll stood behind me. Something was pressed against my skin. A needle. Cold liquid entered my body. My vision blurred. The woman on the phone kept asking what was happening. I tried to warn her. My voice stopped working. The last thing I remember was Mr. Rock's voice over the speakers. Remember, our product is first in class. No substitution will do. When I woke up, I was in the orientation room. 100 folding chairs faced the projector. This time, every chair was occupied. 100 new employees sat in front of me wearing fresh, pale masks. I was standing beside the screen. Ms. Roll stood near the door. She handed me a folder. Ready, Mr. Parker? I looked down at myself. My black slacks were gone. I was wearing a gray suit. It fit badly. Too wide in the shoulders, too short in the sleeves. The projector turned on. My own face appeared on the screen. Not the doll mask. My real face. The one I used to have. I looked younger in the recording. Tired, nervous, human then the video began. The man on the screen smiled. My old face smiled. Are we ready to get started? 100 masked heads turned toward me. And for the first time since I took the job, I understood exactly what I was supposed to do. I began talking about company values, growth, opportunity, innovation, people, first solutions. The words came naturally. I didn't have to think about them. I didn't even have to speak. My voice filled the room anyway. Every few minutes, the projector changed slides. Remember, our product is first in class. Remember, customers don't make mistakes. Remember, think different. Shape the future. One of the new employees started falling asleep. I watched his head slowly lower toward his chest. Ms. Roll handed me a fly swatter. I walked down the aisle. I smacked his leg. He jumped awake. I looked at the name printed on his temporary badge. Mr. Daniel, I said. My voice sounded calm. Professional. Please follow me. He stood. I led him toward the iron doors. On the other side, conveyor belts moved hundreds of cardboard boxes through the warehouse. The short man in the red hard hat still stood beside them. I finally noticed something I'd missed on my first day. None of the boxes were sealed. One passed close enough for me to look inside. There was a mask in it, fresh white plastic, 2 empty eye holes, a painted smile. Another box passed, another mask. Then another, thousands of them. I watched them move toward the far end of the warehouse, toward loading bays, toward trucks, toward cities I had never visited. Mr. Daniel stood beside me. So what does the company actually sell? I looked at him. For a moment, I wanted to tell him everything. Run, leave, never come back. But then something strange happened. I remembered being him, 6 months unemployed, bills piling up, desperate enough to accept anything. I remembered how relieved I'd been when someone called me only an hour after I applied, how hopeful I'd felt pulling into that parking lot, how badly I'd wanted the job to be real. And I remembered the mirror, the hole, the darkness, the fact that I had stared directly into it and waited for panic. It never came. Even now, I know I should be terrified. I know something has been taken from me. I know I should miss my face, my old life. Whatever part of me used to question things, but I don't. That's the part I can't explain. Maybe the mask didn't replace my face. Maybe the job didn't take it. Maybe it only revealed that there wasn't as much underneath as I thought. Mr. Daniel was still waiting for an answer. I placed a hand on his shoulder. He'll understand soon. Then I led him into the call center. His cubicle was ready. Computer, notepad, mechanical pencils. Phone, 2 buttons. Transfer, hold. He sat down. I told him he'd get the hang of it quickly. Then I walked away. 30 seconds later, his phone rang. I stopped at the end of the row and watched. He hesitated. Then he answered. Hello? I smiled beneath my mask. At least, I think I did. It's difficult to tell anymore. Yesterday, another 100 people applied. Today, we have orientation. Tomorrow, we'll probably need another room. Business is growing. Mr. Rock says we're entering a very important period for the company. Apparently, demand is higher than ever. There are a lot of people out there looking for work. People with unstable employment histories. People with bills they can't pay. People who are tired of rejection emails and fake job listings. People desperate enough to apply to a company they've never heard of. People exactly like me.
The listing is still online. $25 an hour. No experience necessary. Benefits after 90 days. The company statement hasn't changed. I used to think it was meaningless. Now I understand it perfectly. We really do connect ambition with opportunity. We really do shape tomorrow. And every individual really does have potential. You just have to be willing to give up a few things first. Your evenings, your weekends, your sleep, your friends, your life outside work. eventually even your face. But don't worry, we provide a replacement. And after long enough, you won't even remember why you needed the original.
It started like every other night shift at the laundromat. I walked through the front door a little before midnight and was greeted by the same depressing view I'd seen hundreds of times before. Long rows of identical washing machines and dryers sat beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. Everything was some shade of white, gray, or faded cream, except for the remains of old neon signs near the windows that gave parts of the room a weak pink and blue glow. The place was open 24 hours a day, although after midnight we rarely got more than a handful of customers. That was one of the reasons I liked working there. Most of my shift was spent inside a small office in the back. It was cramped, dark, and probably hadn't been properly cleaned in years, but it was private. There was a tiny metal desk, an uncomfortable chair, and an old security monitor showing different angles of the laundromat. My job was simple. Keep the place reasonably clean. Help customers when something broke. Make sure nobody slept inside. Check the security cameras every now and then. That was basically it. Nobody cared if I spent the rest of my shift scrolling through my phone, watching videos, or reading. For a night job, it wasn't bad. And that night started exactly the same way. Until around 2 in the morning, I was sitting in the office looking at my phone when movement on the security monitor caught my attention. One of our regular customers had walked in. I'll call her Barb. Barb was probably in her late 40s or early 50s, although I'd never asked. She usually came in late because she claimed the machines were cleaner at night. I wasn't sure how that made sense, but she was harmless enough. She also had a strange sense of humor and enjoyed messing with people. I watched her enter through the front door. She walked directly toward the change machine. I looked back at my phone. A few seconds later, something on the monitor caught my eye again. Barb had put a bill into the machine. The machine rejected it. She tried again. It rejected the bill a second time. Barb immediately lost her mind. She slapped the machine. Then she hit it harder. Then she kicked it. I sat forward. "Come on, Barb." She grabbed the sides of the machine and shook it. Normally, something like that would have been loud enough for me to hear clearly from the office. The walls were thin. I should have heard the metallic bang when her shoe hit the machine. I should have heard the coins rattling inside when she shook it. At the very least, I should have heard Barb swearing. But I heard nothing, absolutely nothing. The only sound in the office was the soft electrical hum coming from the old security monitor. I stared at the screen. Barb kicked the machine again. Silence. Something about that bothered me. I stood up. Maybe there was something wrong with the audio. Although, now that I thought about it, I couldn't remember whether the cameras even had audio. Either way, I needed to stop her before she damaged the machine. I left the office. Barb? The laundromat was quiet. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere toward the back, a dryer was running. Thrum, 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 I walked toward the change machine. "Come on, Barb, don't break the damn thing. I'll fix it." No response. I rounded the corner. Nobody was there. I stopped. The change machine stood against the wall exactly where it always had. There was no Barb. I looked toward the rows of washers. Empty. Then toward the dryers. Empty. For some reason, the laundromat suddenly looked much larger than usual. The rows of machines seemed to stretch farther into the building than they should have. I knew that was impossible. I'd worked there long enough to know exactly how many rows there were. But standing beside the change machine, I couldn't see the far wall clearly. The machine seemed to continue into a darker part of the building where the fluorescent lights became weaker and weaker. like the laundromat was stretching away from me. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Nothing changed. Very funny, Barb. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. You can come out now. Nothing, if you knew Barb. Hiding somewhere just to scare the night employee wasn't completely impossible. I checked between the rows. Nothing. Then I walked toward the restroom. Barb? My voice cracked slightly. I knocked. The restroom door slowly creaked open. Inside was a stained sink, a toilet, and a fluorescent bulb that couldn't decide whether it wanted to stay on. Nobody was there. I turned around. The front door opened. I froze. Barb walked inside. For a moment, I couldn't move. She didn't look at me. She walked directly toward the change machine, the exact same way she'd done on the security monitor. She took a bill from her purse, fed it into the machine. The machine rejected it. She tried again. It rejected the bill. Then Barb slapped the machine. My stomach dropped. She hit it again. Then she kicked it. Every movement was identical. I had already watched this happen. Not something similar. Exactly this. Barb finally noticed me standing there. She frowned. Are you going to keep standing there like an idiot? Or are you going to help me? I stared at her. What? The machine. She pointed at it. It keeps spitting my money out. Yeah, she looked at me strangely. You okay? Fine. I don't remember exactly what I said after that. Probably nonsense. I helped her get change, then hurried back to the office. I closed the door. My heart was pounding. I grabbed my water bottle and took a huge drink. Then I poured some water onto my hand and rubbed it over my face. Okay, I sat down. Okay, maybe I'd been tired. Maybe I'd fallen asleep for a minute. Maybe I'd watched some kind of delayed recording. That was the obvious explanation. The security system was old. Maybe the video feed had frozen and started playing something recorded earlier. Except Barb hadn't been there earlier. I knew she hadn't. Still, there had to be an explanation. I sat there staring at the monitor. A little while later, the front door opened on screen. Another regular customer entered. I'll call him John. John walked into the laundromat and seemed to say something. His lips moved. I heard nothing. My entire body went cold. I jumped out of the chair. Not this again. I ran from the office into the laundromat. Nobody was there. John? Nothing. Only that dryer. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It seemed louder now. I ran toward the front windows. The walk felt longer than it should have. That scared me almost as much as the camera. The laundromat wasn't that large. But the front windows seemed to move farther away every time I took another step. Eventually, I reached them. Outside, the parking lot was empty. The tall lights above it flickered. Even the parking lot looked wrong. The lights seemed farther away than usual. The spaces between them looked wider. The darkness beyond the lot seemed deeper. I backed away from the window. Nope, I wasn't going outside. Not yet. Instead, I walked toward the change machine and pretended to inspect it. I waited. About 10 minutes later, the front door opened. John walked inside. This time, I heard it. The bell above the door made a small metallic sound. John was whistling some cheerful tune. He saw me standing beside the change machine. Evening, I stared at him. Hey, you all right? Yeah, he raised an eyebrow. Then he continued toward the washers. I ran back to the office. I pulled out my phone, 2:10 a.m. Then I looked at the security monitor. There was a timestamp in the bottom corner, 2:20 a.m. I leaned closer. My phone said 2:10. The monitor said 2:20. 10 minutes ahead, I sat back. No way. The camera wasn't delayed. It was showing the future. That was ridiculous. Completely impossible. But I'd already watched Barb enter before she actually entered. I'd watched John do the same thing. There was only one way to be sure. I stared at the monitor. A minute later, something appeared beneath one of the washing machines. Water. A small pool of soapy water slowly spread across the floor. I grabbed a mop and ran into the laundromat. The floor beneath the washer was dry. I stood there holding the mop. Nothing happened. John walked past carrying a basket of clothes. He looked at me, then at the completely dry floor, then back at me. You good? Perfect. He kept walking. I waited. A few minutes passed. Then the washing machine made a strange choking sound. I looked down. Soapy water suddenly sputtered from underneath it, exactly where I'd seen it on the monitor. I actually smiled. I couldn't help it. For a few seconds, the fear disappeared. This was incredible. I had a security camera that showed me the future. Maybe only 10 minutes ahead, but still. I cleaned the water. Then I started experimenting. I'd watch the monitor, see something happen, go into the laundromat, wait, then watch it happen again in real life. Every time, the monitor was right. A customer dropped a sock. 5 minutes later, I watched him drop it. A dryer stopped. Then it stopped in real life. Someone left a basket beside a chair. A few minutes later, there it was. It became almost fun. For a little while, I felt like I had some kind of superpower. Then 3 o'clock came. I was sitting in the office with tired, bloodshot eyes, staring at the monitor. Something moved at the far end of the laundromat. I leaned forward. Someone was standing between the rows of machines. Their back was facing the camera. For a second, I thought it was another customer. Then I noticed the hoodie. My hoodie. Then the hair. A messy bun. Exactly like mine. I stopped breathing. The person on the screen was me. I leaned so close to the monitor that static prickled against my forehead. The other me stood completely still. Then she suddenly turned her head. Her face was mine. Future me looked frightened, not confused, not nervous. Terrified, she looked directly toward the camera, toward me. Then she quickly ran out of frame. I shot out of the chair. I ran into the laundromat. Empty, hello? No answer. The dryer continued. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The sound had become louder. It echoed between rows of machines that still seemed far longer than they should have been. I ran toward the entrance. Then I locked it. Deadbolt. I switched off the open sign. No more customers. I didn't care if I got fired. I went back to the office. Future me was on the monitor again. She was running between the washing machines. She kept looking over her shoulder. Something was chasing her, or she believed something was. Then she sprinted toward the front door. I stared at the screen. No, I wasn't going to do that. The monitor showed the future. Fine, but now that I knew what was coming, I could change it. I would stay inside the office. I would not run toward the door. I would prove that whatever I saw wasn't guaranteed to happen. About 10 minutes later, I was running toward the front door. I couldn't tell you exactly why. Something had moved at the end of one of the aisles. Maybe it was a shadow. Maybe it wasn't. Whatever I saw made every instinct in my body scream at me to run. So I ran, exactly like future me. I kept looking over my shoulder, exactly like future me. And while I was doing it, the worst part was knowing that I'd already watched myself do this. I reached the entrance. Locked, of course. I'd locked it myself. I turned around. One of the dryer doors was hanging open. I hadn't opened it. Nobody else was there. I hurried back to the office. My phone read 3:10 a.m. The monitor read 3:15 a.m. I stared at both. 5 minutes. The difference had been 10 minutes earlier. Now it was 5. The future was getting closer. I watched the screen. Future me appeared again. She ran toward the open dryer. Then she climbed on top of it. She sat there with her legs hanging over the edge like a little kid sitting on a kitchen counter. She looked directly at the security camera, directly at me. I couldn't handle it anymore. "What are you looking at?" I shouted. Future me suddenly jumped down. She slammed the dryer door. Then she leaned toward the glass. She breathed onto it. Condensation formed. She raised one finger and quickly wrote something across the fogged glass. Before I could read it, she ran away. A few minutes later, I found myself moving toward that same dryer. The fluorescent lights were louder. I know that sounds stupid. Lights shouldn't sound louder. But the electrical buzzing had grown until I could feel it inside my teeth. And the dryer was no longer making a soft, rhythmic sound. It had become heavier. Slower, thud, 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 almost like a heartbeat. The door was open. I climbed onto the dryer. I sat down. My legs hung over the edge. Then I looked toward the security camera, exactly like I'd seen myself do. I waited. Nothing happened. What am I supposed to do? No answer. I jumped down. My foot slipped. My shoulder hit the dryer door. It slammed shut. Without thinking, I leaned toward the glass. I breathed onto it. The glass fogged. My finger rose. And suddenly I understood. I wasn't copying future me. Future me had been me. There had never been a choice. I dragged my finger across the condensation. Run. I stared at the word. Then I ran. I sprinted back into the office and slammed the door behind me. My hands were shaking violently. I stared at the security monitor. Future me was standing directly outside the office. Not running anymore, just standing there. She looked into the camera, at me. Then she reached into her pocket. She pulled out her phone. She started typing. I looked down. My phone was already in my hands. I was typing too. My fingers stopped. On the monitor, future me's fingers stopped. Then her eyes suddenly moved upward, past the camera. Her face changed. Every bit of color disappeared from it. Pure terror. Something moved into frame behind her. I couldn't see what it was. It was too large, too dark. Whatever it was blocked the fluorescent lights behind it. Not dimmed them, blocked them completely. Like a piece of the room itself had been erased. Something extended from the darkness, slowly toward future me's shoulder. I looked at my phone, 3:24 a.m., then at the monitor, 3:25 a.m., 1 minute. The difference had almost disappeared. I backed away from the office door. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. The monitor showed future me standing perfectly still. The dark shape moved closer. I waited. 30 seconds. 20, 10, then the monitor changed. 3:25. My phone changed. 3:25. The future and the present had finally become the same moment. Every sound stopped. Not slowly. Instantly, the dryers went silent. The lights stopped buzzing. The building made no sound at all. I couldn't even hear myself breathing. I closed my eyes. I braced for whatever was coming. I think I prayed. I don't remember the words. I waited to feel something touch my shoulder. Nothing happened. Then, without feeling myself move, I was suddenly standing outside the office, exactly where future me had been. I opened my eyes. The laundromat was empty. The office door was behind me. No Barb, no John, no customers. Nothing dark standing behind me. Just endless rows of washers and dryers beneath pale fluorescent lights. Then the dryer started again. Thrum, 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 I spun around. Nothing. I looked toward the camera. Its small red light was on. I realized something then. There was no future version of me on the monitor anymore. Because there was no gap anymore. Whatever had separated the camera's time from mine had closed, and whatever had been behind future me should have been behind me now. I didn't wait to find out where it had gone. I ran. The front door seemed impossibly far away. I sprinted between the rows. The fluorescent lights flashed above me, one after another. The laundromat stretched. I swear it did. Every time I thought I was getting close to the entrance, another row of machines appeared. Thrum, 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 the dryer sound followed me, except I could no longer tell which dryer it was coming from. Maybe all of them, maybe none of them. I kept running. Then something brushed my shoulder. Heat exploded through my hoodie. I screamed. I didn't look back. For 1 second, the lights around me dimmed. Something enormous moved across the machines beside me, a shadow too tall to belong to a person. I ran harder. Finally, my hands hit the front door. I fought with the deadbolt. My fingers wouldn't work properly. Come on, behind me, thrum. Closer, I twisted the lock. Thrum, closer, the deadbolt released. I ripped the door open. Cold night air hit my face. I ran across the parking lot. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I unlocked it, climbed inside, slammed the door, and locked everything. For a full minute, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel. Then, I looked at the laundromat. From outside, it looked normal, small even. The rows of machines ended exactly where they were supposed to. The fluorescent lights buzzed behind the windows. The open sign was still off. Nothing moved inside. I checked my phone. 3:31 a.m. I should have driven away immediately. Instead, I sat there, trying to convince myself I'd had some kind of breakdown. Sleep deprivation. Stress. Maybe the old security system had malfunctioned. Maybe I'd somehow confused recorded footage with live footage. Maybe I'd imagined the building stretching. There were explanations for some of it. Not good explanations, but explanations. Then my shoulders started hurting. I reached across and touched the spot. The fabric of my hoodie felt strange, hard. I turned on the interior light. There was a dark mark on my shoulder. I pulled the hoodie down enough to look at the skin. It looked burned, not badly enough to destroy the skin, but enough to leave a black-red shape. 5 long marks, like fingers. That's when I stopped trying to explain it. I'm still sitting in my car as I write this. It's almost 4 now. The laundromat is directly across the parking lot from me. I haven't seen anyone enter or leave. I've called my manager twice. No answer. I texted that there was an emergency and I had to leave. Still nothing. At the very least, I'm calling in tomorrow. Honestly, I'm probably quitting. The problem is that I haven't driven away yet. I know I should. My keys are in the ignition. The engine is running. There's nothing keeping me here. Except for one thing. About 5 minutes ago, I looked through the windshield and noticed movement inside the laundromat. Someone was standing near the change machine. Barb, at least. I thought it was Barb. She walked toward the machine, put in a bill. The machine rejected it. She hit it, then kicked it, exactly like before. I almost laughed. Maybe the whole thing was starting again. Then Barb turned toward the parking lot. She looked directly at my car. Even from this distance, I could tell something was wrong. She wasn't wearing the clothes she'd worn earlier. She was wearing my hoodie, my messy bun, my face. It wasn't Barb. It was me. I grabbed my phone. 3:47 a.m. Through the windshield, I watched the other me walk toward the front windows. She raised one hand, then pointed toward the office. I didn't move. She pointed again. No, I actually said it aloud. I'm not going back in there. The other me shook her head. Then she started pounding on the glass. I couldn't hear it from inside the car. That bothered me immediately. The laundromat was only a short distance away. She hit the window again. Nothing. No sound. Just like Barb on the monitor. My stomach dropped. This wasn't happening now. I looked toward my phone. 3:48 a.m. There was no security monitor in the car, no timestamp telling me how far ahead I was seeing. The other me stopped hitting the glass. Then she wrote something on it. Her finger moved slowly enough for me to read. Don't drive. I stared at the words. Then the fluorescent lights behind her went out. One row at a time. The darkness started at the back of the laundromat and moved forward, a line of blackness swallowing the building. The other me looked over her shoulder, then back at me. She started screaming. I couldn't hear her. She pointed at my car, not at me, at the car. I looked into my rearview mirror. Nothing was behind me. The back seat was empty. I turned around anyway. Still empty. Then I noticed the burn on my shoulder getting hot. Not warm. Hot, I grabbed it through my hoodie. The pain became sharp. The 5 marks on my skin seemed to pulse beneath my fingers. Thrum, I froze. The sound had come from inside the car. Thrum, slow, heavy, exactly like the dryer. I turned off the engine. The sound continued. Thrum, I looked at the laundromat. The other me was gone. The lights were back on. Everything looked normal again. Then something knocked once against the trunk of my car. I nearly screamed. I grabbed the door handle, then stopped. Don't drive. That was what she'd written. Not run, not get out, don't drive. I didn't understand why. Another knock came from the trunk, then another. 3 slow knocks. I stared at the rearview mirror. The parking lot behind me was empty. My phone buzzed. I almost dropped it. A text from my manager. Finally, I opened it. You left the store unattended? I stared at the message. Then typed. Something happened. I can't go back inside. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. His reply came through. What do you mean, go back inside? I frowned. I typed, I'm in the parking lot. This time, his response came immediately. No, you're not. My hands went cold. I looked through the windshield at the laundromat. The front windows reflected my car, my headlights, the parking lot, everything. I called my manager. He answered after 2 rings. Where are you? I asked. What? Where are you right now? Home. Why? You said I'm not in the parking lot. Because I'm looking at the cameras. I couldn't speak. He continued. You're still inside. I slowly looked toward the laundromat. What? You're in the office. No, I'm watching you. My throat tightened. I'm sitting in my car. Then who's in the office? The burn on my shoulder pulsed. Thrum, I looked at the security camera mounted outside above the laundromat entrance. Its red light was blinking. Tell me what I'm doing, I whispered. My manager went quiet. What? On the camera. Tell me what I'm doing. Another pause. You're sitting at the desk. Am I moving? No. Can you see my face? Silence. Can you see my face? He finally answered. You're looking directly at the camera. My stomach turned. Anything else? My manager stopped speaking. Then I heard him inhale sharply. What? I asked. There's somebody behind you. The line went dead. At the exact same moment, every light inside the laundromat went out. I started the car. I didn't care what the message on the glass had said anymore. The engine turned over. My hands gripped the steering wheel. Then the headlights illuminated something standing directly in front of my car. Me. Same hoodie. Same hair. Same face. Except the burn on her shoulder was much worse. It spread across her neck and down one side of her body. She raised both hands. Stop. I slammed the brakes even though I wasn't moving. She walked toward my driver's side window. I locked the doors. She leaned close to the glass. Her face looked exhausted. Terrified, she raised one finger. Then she wrote across the fogged window. You never left. I stared at her. What? She pointed toward the laundromat. Then toward me. Then she vanished. Not walked away. Vanished, the parking lot changed. For half a second, I wasn't sitting in my car anymore. I was sitting at the metal desk in the back office. The security monitor was in front of me. My hands were resting on the desk. Then I blinked. Car again. I screamed. Another blink. Office. The monitor showed the parking lot. My car was sitting outside. Someone was inside it. Me, blink, office, blink, car. The two places started switching faster. My head felt like it was being pulled apart. I closed my eyes. I refused to open them. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes. Then everything became quiet again. I opened my eyes. I'm in the office. I think. The metal desk is under my hands. The security monitor is humming. My phone says 4:06 a.m. The monitor says 4:06 a.m. Same time. My car is visible outside. Empty. The front door of the laundromat is locked. The burn is still on my shoulder, and something is running inside one of the dryers. I can hear it. Thrum, thrum, thrum. I haven't gone out to check. I won't. I'm sitting here typing this instead. I keep looking at the security monitor. Nothing has moved for several minutes. That's good, I think. The only strange thing is one of the cameras. Camera 4. The one aimed at the dryers. There's a woman sitting on top of one of them. Her legs are dangling over the edge. She's wearing my hoodie. She has my face. And she's staring directly into the camera. I've been watching her for almost a minute. She hasn't moved. My phone still says 4:06. The monitor still says 4:06. Neither clock is changing anymore. And a few seconds ago, the woman on camera 4 smiled. I didn't. Then she raised one finger to her lips. Behind me, the office door just clicked open. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story. My wife printed 186 missing dog flyers today. I know the exact number because I counted them, although I hadn't planned to. I was sitting at our kitchen table, cutting the little tabs along the bottom of each page, the ones with Dana's phone number printed vertically so people could tear one off. Counting gave me something simple to focus on. It was easier than looking across the room and watching my wife slowly fall apart. At the top of every flyer, in letters much bigger than they needed to be, Dana had written, missing Yorkie, please help U.S. bring Cinna home. Below the words was a picture of Cinna from last Christmas. She was sitting on the arm of our couch wearing a red sweater. One ear stood straight up while the other folded forward. She always looked slightly annoyed in photographs, which was funny because she was probably the sweetest dog I'd ever known. Under the picture, Dana had included everything she thought a stranger might need to recognize her. 8 pounds, tan and gray fur, pink collar, very friendly, might be frightened. At the bottom of the page, she had added one final sentence. She is our family. Dana stood at the kitchen counter, feeding sheet after sheet through the paper cutter. She hadn't slept properly in 3 nights. Her hair was still tied in the messy knot she'd put it in the day before, and dark circles had formed beneath her eyes. Every movement looked tired, but she refused to stop. That's enough, I told her. She pushed another page beneath the blade. Dana, I heard you. It's supposed to reach 102 today. I know. You've already covered the whole neighborhood. I haven't done the apartments behind the elementary school. You did those yesterday. I did the front building. She reached for another flyer. I leaned across the table and placed my hand on the remaining stack. Please, just take an hour. Dana finally looked at me. What if somebody saw her? They can call us. What if they saw her and they don't have one of these? You've put flyers on practically every telephone pole between here and Chapman. Then I'll go farther. There wasn't any anger in her voice. Part of me wished there had been. Anger would have been easier. I removed my hand from the stack. At least take water. I will. You said that yesterday. You came home with almost the whole bottle. That earned the smallest smile. Okay, Dad. I mean it. I know. She bent down, kissed the top of my head, gathered another stack of flyers against her chest, and headed outside. I went to the front window. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. Cinna had been missing for 3 days, and I could already see what it was doing to my wife. People tried to reassure us. Dogs escaped all the time, they said. Someone had probably picked her up. A tiny Yorkie wouldn't make it very far alone. Keep checking the shelters. Put pictures online. Ask the neighbors. They were trying to help. They didn't know Dana. More importantly, they didn't understand what it had taken for me to get my wife back. When I first met Dana, she had more energy than anyone I'd ever known. She worked in marketing for a medical device company. By 28, she'd already been promoted twice. By 30, she was managing employees older than both of us. She ran half marathons. She remembered everyone's birthday. Her calendar looked complicated enough to control air traffic. She could remember a restaurant I'd casually mentioned once and surprised me with a reservation 3 months later. She was exhausting. I loved her for it, most of the time. Work was probably the only subject we regularly argued about. They weren't dramatic fights. Nobody threw plates or packed bags. They were the smaller arguments that repeat so often they slowly create permanent grooves inside a marriage. I'd cook dinner and get a text at 7 saying a meeting was running late. We'd make plans for Saturday, and she'd say she needed to log in for 20 minutes. Somehow those 20 minutes had a strange habit of becoming 2 hours. Once, during an anniversary dinner, I realized we'd spent almost the entire appetizer talking about a presentation she had to give on Monday. Why do you work this hard? I asked her. Because I like it. I know, but you don't have to. She looked genuinely confused. Nobody has to do most things. I make enough for both of us. Dana laughed. You think I work because we're poor? That's not what I said. Then, what are you saying? I told her I missed her. That was the truth. Sometimes it felt like her office got the best version of my wife, while I got whatever energy remained at 8:30 at night. Dana told me her career mattered to her. She was good at what she did, and she wasn't going to abandon something she loved simply because my salary was enough to pay the mortgage. I told her I understood. Usually, I did. Around that time, we had a problem with rats getting into our garage. Somehow, dealing with them became my responsibility. I'd promised to take care of it, and then forget. I'd promise again. Then, forget again. One night, Dana came home after 9 and found rat droppings beside a bag of dog food we'd bought for her parents' Labrador. We have got to do something about this. I know. You've been saying that for a month. I'll do it tomorrow. You said that last week. I've been busy too, Dana. She dropped her keys onto the counter. Maybe that's why I stay at the office. At least they don't have rats. It wasn't her best joke. We laughed about it later. The next morning, I finally dealt with the problem. I cleaned the shelves, put down traps, and bought poison. Dana immediately disliked the poison. She made me store it high inside the cabinet above the workbench, even though we didn't have children at the time. What if somebody's dog gets in here? She asked. Whose dog? I don't know. A dog. Then we'll keep the garage closed. She gave me that particular look she used whenever she thought I'd completely missed the point. A few years later, when Dana became pregnant and we started childproofing the house, she asked whether I'd thrown the rat poison away. I told her I had. Pregnancy was the first thing I'd ever seen force Dana to slow down. Not much, but enough. She became frightened almost immediately. Heart problems ran in her family. Not the usual problems people develop as they age, but something congenital and hereditary. Doctors explained the medical terminology to me more than once over the years. I never remembered all of it. Dana didn't need anyone to explain it. She'd grown up with it. Her younger sister had died when Dana was 4 years old. Dana remembered almost nothing about the girl herself. She remembered a yellow dress. She remembered that they shared a bedroom. She remembered that her sister hated peas. What she remembered clearly was the night her sister died. Her mother's screaming, a paramedic stepping on one of Dana's toys, someone carrying her little sister through the hallway while one small arm hung loosely toward the floor. That memory never left her. So every appointment during Dana's pregnancy frightened her. Every test frightened her. Every little pause before a doctor said everything looked normal frightened her. Our daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in March. We named her Sophie. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She had an unreasonable amount of dark hair and a scream that sounded far too powerful to come from something so small. When the nurse placed Sophie on Dana's chest, my wife started crying so hard that for a second I thought something was wrong. Then I realized she was laughing too. I'd never seen another human being look that happy. I loved Sophie from the first moment I saw her. Before she was born, there had obviously been a version of my life in which she didn't exist. After meeting her, I couldn't imagine that version anymore. Dana took 4 months away from work. Those might have been the happiest months of our marriage. I know how that sounds. But I'd come home and find Dana sitting on the couch with Sophie asleep against her chest. Sometimes Sophie would be kicking her legs in her little vibrating chair while Dana cooked. We started walking together after dinner. We ate meals together. Our weekends belonged to us. Sometimes I'd stand in the kitchen and hear Dana talking complete nonsense to Sophie in the next room. And I'd think that this was what everything had been leading toward. The house simply felt right with them in it. A little later, Sophie started eating Pures. Apple and cinnamon was the first flavor she really loved. The first time Dana opened one of those jars, I could smell cinnamon from across the kitchen. Guess that's why the rats never came back, I said. Dana looked at me. What? Cinnamon, I read somewhere rats hate the smell. We haven't had rats in 2 years. I know. Apparently their noses are sensitive. If a smell is strong enough, it can drown everything else out. Drown out what? Food, other animals. Things nearby they should probably notice. Dana stared at me for a moment. So Sophie is pest control now? Finally earning her keep. You're horrible. She was smiling. Sophie saw the spoon approaching and opened her mouth like a baby bird. Somehow, half the food still ended up on her cheeks. Dana laughed and wiped her face. After that, Dana started calling her Cinnamon. At first, it was my little cinnamon girl. Then just Cinnamon. Sometimes Cinny when Dana was tired. She's going to hate us when she's 15, and we tell people about this, Dana said one afternoon. Then we won't tell anybody. I'm telling everybody. You are a terrible mother. I know. Sophie slapped both hands against the tray. Dana laughed so hard she nearly dropped the spoon. I remember that afternoon more clearly than I remember most of that year. The heart problem appeared during a routine appointment. A murmur. Maybe nothing, the pediatrician told us. Maybe something. A cardiologist found enough to keep watching, but not enough to panic about. For Dana, that meant panicking constantly. She wanted to know whether it was the same condition her sister had suffered from. She wanted to know whether she'd passed it to Sophie. She wanted to know whether a baby with a heart problem could simply stop breathing during the night. The doctor was careful when answering. I wasn't. She's fine, I'd tell Dana after appointments. You don't know that. Neither do you. What if it's the same thing? It isn't. How do you know? Because I'm her dad, and I've decided. Sometimes that made her smile. Dana extended her maternity leave by another month, then another. Eventually, her company started asking when she planned to return. Dana finally decided she was ready. She missed adult conversations. She missed dressing for somewhere other than Target. She missed being good at something that didn't involve keeping another human being alive. I told her we'd make it work. Sophie would go to daycare 3 days a week. Dana's mother would take her one day. I'd change my own schedule whenever possible. The first time Dana came home late again, I remember looking at the clock. 7:42. Dinner was cold. Sophie was asleep against me. Dana came through the door apologizing. She kissed Sophie, kissed me, and immediately started explaining some emergency at work. 5 weeks back, and they've already chained you to the desk. She stopped. Don't start. I'm not starting anything. That tone is starting something. I don't have a tone. You absolutely have a tone. Sophie woke before either of us could continue. Dana had only been back at work for a few weeks when our daughter died. We put Sophie to bed exactly as we always did. That was the part Dana could never accept afterward. There had been no dramatic warning, no fever, no unusual crying, nothing that would have made either of us think we needed to sit beside her crib all night. She ate, she played, she fell asleep. Sometime before morning, her heart stopped. Dana found her. I don't like remembering what happened afterward. The nursery was cold. Dana made a sound I had never heard from another human being. Paramedics arrived. Then police. Dana's mother came. My brother came. Our house filled with people, while Sophie was somewhere else. Someone asked us the standard questions. Medications? Cleaning products? Anything dangerous in the house? Anything unusual Sophie could have reached? Dana answered most of them before I could. We baby-proofed everything. Then she looked at me. I nodded. Because of Sophie's heart and Dana's family history, everyone already had an explanation that made sense. Dana's sister had died young. Sophie's cardiologist had already discovered something worth monitoring. Sometimes, we were told, these things happened suddenly. Sometimes there wasn't enough warning to prevent them. Dana heard something different. She heard that she had given this to Sophie. She became convinced our daughter's death was her fault, not only because of genetics. Because she'd gone back to work. I should have been here. You were here. I mean, with her. She was sleeping. What if something happened earlier? Nothing happened earlier. What if I missed something? You didn't. What if I hadn't gone back? Dana, I left her. You went to work. I left her. For years, I repeated the same things to my wife. It wasn't her fault. She couldn't have known. She loved Sophie. There was nothing she could have done. Going back to work did not kill our daughter. Some nights, I said those things 10 times. Dana resigned 2 weeks after the funeral. I was relieved. That's one of the things I never told her. Of course, she couldn't have returned to work immediately after losing Sophie. Nobody could reasonably expect that. But somewhere inside me, I was relieved that there would be no more deadlines. No more meetings. No laptop making noises at 9 at night. I thought grief would make everything else smaller for a while. I thought Dana and I would simply exist together until we healed. That wasn't what happened. The first year was unbearable. The second was quieter. Dana stopped spending time with friends because most of them had children. Then one became pregnant, then another. Eventually, invitations stopped arriving after Dana had politely declined enough of them. She didn't return to work. She barely went anywhere. I cooked, I cleaned, I handled the bills. I made excuses for both of us. I sat beside her on nights when she couldn't sleep. I learned that there are only so many ways to answer the same question. Do you think she knew I loved her? Yes, always yes. Of course she knew. I loved my wife through all of it. But after several years, something ugly began growing inside me. I started resenting the dead. Saying I was tired sounds better. But resentment is closer to the truth. I resented Mother's Day. I resented Sophie's birthday. I resented the anniversary of her death. I resented strangers' children when one of them laughed a certain way in a grocery store, and the sound ruined Dana's entire day. I resented television commercials for showing babies when Dana had been having a good evening. Once, on what would have been Sophie's third birthday, Dana wanted to spend the evening looking through photographs. I told her I had a headache. I didn't. I went into the bedroom and watched something stupid on my phone while my wife sat alone in the living room, crying over pictures of our daughter. For almost 20 minutes, I enjoyed the silence. I hated myself afterward. Mostly, more than anything else, I missed my wife. I didn't even expect to get back the woman she'd been before Sophie. I understood that woman was gone. I would have settled for someone who laughed occasionally. Someone who wanted to go out for dinner. Someone who could sit through a stupid movie without getting up halfway through because some small thing had reminded her of Sophie. I lasted almost 4 years before I brought Cinna home. The puppy could fit in one hand. A coworker's sister had a litter of Yorkies, and I'd gone over telling myself I was only going to look. One of the puppies climbed into my lap. Then she fell asleep there. I took a picture and sent it to Dana. Her reply contained one word. No, I brought the puppy home anyway. Dana was furious for approximately 5 minutes. We talked about this. No, I sent you a picture and you said no. That's generally considered talking. You haven't held her. I don't want to hold her. Fine, don't do that. Do what? Hand me the dog while I'm telling you I don't want the dog. I handed her the dog. The puppy licked Dana's chin. And Dana laughed. Actually laughed. Not the small, polite sound she'd been making for years whenever she knew I was trying to cheer her up. A real laugh. Sudden, surprised, for one embarrassing second, I thought I might cry. The puppy didn't have a name yet. I suggested Penny. Dana suggested Cinna. I immediately understood. No, her smile weakened. What? That's weird. It isn't weird. It's a little weird. It's after cinnamon. I know what it's after. Then why did you ask? I didn't. Dana held the puppy against her chest. I like it. I remember looking at the two of them and thinking that naming a dog after our dead daughter's nickname felt like taking grief therapy one step too far. But Dana was smiling. So Cinna it was. And I have to give that little dog credit. She accomplished something therapists, medication, relatives, friends, and I had failed to do. She gave Dana reasons to leave the house. At first, it was simply because Cinna refused to use the backyard. Dana would take her around the block. One lap became 2. Then they started going to the park. Cinna woke up at 7 every morning, so Dana started getting dressed earlier. She began showering every day again. She spoke to neighbors. Then she started talking to old friends. New pictures began appearing on her phone. Pictures that weren't old photographs of Sophie. Dana and Cinna at the beach. Dana and Cinna wearing matching Halloween bandanas. Cinna sitting upright in the passenger seat of Dana's car, looking like a tiny, disapproving grandmother. I joked that Cinna had replaced me. Secretly, I loved it. Dana started cooking again. She played music in the kitchen. She made fun of me. About 6 months ago, she laughed so hard at something stupid I said that she snorted. She immediately covered her face with both hands. Oh my God. I couldn't stop smiling. What? She asked. Nothing. Why are you looking at me like that? I missed that. Dana understood exactly what I meant. She leaned over and kissed me. For the first time in years, I thought maybe we'd finally made it through. Then the walks started getting longer. Not much at first. 20 minutes. Then 40. Dana learned the names of people in our neighborhood whom I'd never even met. She started having coffee with a woman 2 streets away who owned some kind of terrier. Once, Dana and Cinna were gone for almost 3 hours because they'd driven to a park across town. I teased Dana about finally having a social life. I was glad she did. I really was. A few months later, I came home and found Dana sitting at the kitchen table with her old laptop open. What are you doing? She turned the screen slightly away from me, pretending to hide it. Nothing. That's suspicious. I'm updating my URSM. I must have paused for a second too long because her smile changed. Just updating it. I didn't say anything. You did that thing with your face. What thing? That thing. I don't have a thing. You absolutely have a thing. She smiled again and turned the laptop toward me. I've been thinking maybe part-time. Or consulting. Something small. Okay? Okay? Why wouldn't it be okay? She studied my face. Then she leaned over and kissed my cheek. For the next week, the laptop stayed on the kitchen table. I noticed. I also noticed Dana had started checking her email before breakfast. Neither of those things meant anything. 2 weeks ago, she had copies of her URSM printed on thick cream-colored paper. I told her they looked nice. The afternoon Cinna disappeared, Dana took her into the backyard. Her phone rang. Dana stepped inside to answer it. When she returned outside, the side gate was open. Cinna was gone. We searched until after midnight. The next morning, we called every animal shelter within 30 miles. Dana posted pictures in neighborhood groups, on Facebook, on Nextdoor, and on lost pet websites I'd never heard of. We drove slowly through neighborhood streets with the windows down, calling Cinna's name. I kept telling Dana that Yorkies were small and friendly. Someone had probably picked her up. That was easier to imagine than Cinna lying beside a road somewhere. By the second day, Dana wasn't eating unless I placed food directly in front of her. By the third, she wasn't sleeping. And suddenly, it felt like 5 years ago. The same frightened eyes. The same desperate bargaining. The same belief that if she could just do one more thing, search one more street, make one more call, then something terrible might still be undone. What if somebody stole her? I don't think anyone stole her. What if she got hurt? We checked the roads. What if she's hiding somewhere? Then somebody will find her. What if nobody does? We'll keep looking. What if we'll keep looking? This morning, our printer finally ran out of paper. Even that didn't stop Dana. She went to the stack of arson she'd printed 2 weeks earlier. Then, she started feeding them into the printer, one by one. I sat at the kitchen table, cutting the phone number tabs, while Cinna's face appeared on one side of each sheet and Dana's old life remained neatly printed on the other. Job titles, promotions, awards, 11 years of experience. Page after page disappeared beneath the words missing Yorkie. I didn't say anything. It's almost 10 now. Dana is still outside. I texted her 15 minutes ago and told her to come home. It's still 91 degrees outside. She replied that she has one more street left. Knowing my wife, that probably means at least 3. I put a bottle of water in the refrigerator for her. Dana likes her water almost frozen. There's dinner in the microwave, too. She probably won't eat it, but I'll make her try. Tomorrow, I'll convince her to stay home for a few hours. Maybe we'll call the shelters together. I'll drive this time. She's exhausted. The heat worries me, although lately the heat has been worrying me for another reason. Our garage gets much hotter than the rest of the house. There's almost no insulation in there, and the little vent above the side door doesn't help much once the afternoon sun has been beating against the roof for several hours. I thought I had longer. Apparently, I didn't. The smell isn't strong yet, not unless you already know it's there. Dana hasn't noticed. She's barely spent any time in the garage since Cinna disappeared. Whenever she does go inside, she's moving too quickly to notice much of anything. She grabs leashes, flashlights, anything else she thinks might help her search. Still, I can't leave Cinna there for another day. I wish this were the kind of smell that could simply be covered by another one. Something familiar, something a person already expected to smell. Some smells are easier to hide than others. Cinna is behind the plastic storage bins against the back wall. She's wrapped inside one of our old moving blankets. She's so small that hiding her wasn't difficult. That part was easier than I expected. The difficult part has been listening to Dana search for her. Yesterday evening, Dana stood at the end of our driveway, holding Cinna's bag of treats. She shook it. Then she called Cinna's name. She waited. Nothing, she called again. Nothing, finally, she shouted, "Come home," into a street that had already become quiet. I went inside before she did. I'll move Cinna tonight after Dana falls asleep. There's a road about a mile from our house where people drive much too fast. Part of it doesn't have a sidewalk. There's only a narrow shoulder and dry brush. I'll leave Cinna near there before morning. Nothing complicated. It doesn't need to be complicated. Dana doesn't need an investigation. She needs an answer. She'll see the road. She'll see Cinna. She'll remember the open gate. And the explanation will be obvious. Cinna got out. She wandered too far. Maybe she was frightened. Maybe she was trying to find her way home. Then a car came along. It'll hurt Dana. I know that. But not knowing is worse. Not knowing allows every possibility to stay alive. Give someone an answer, and eventually they can learn to build their life around it. Dana already has. I hate knowing she's going to suffer again. But she'll recover. Cinna proved that she can. I'll cook for Dana. I'll sit beside her when she can't sleep. I'll remind her to eat. I'll tell her the open gate wasn't her fault. I'll tell her she couldn't have known. I'll tell her there was nothing she could have done. I'll repeat it as many times as she needs to hear it. Eventually, we'll be okay again. We always are. Before I move Cinna tonight, I should probably clean the garage. Dana hasn't noticed that the cabinet above my workbench is unlocked. Years ago, when we were childproofing the house for Sophie, Dana made me promise there was nothing dangerous left inside it. I told her there wasn't. Most of what I'd bought when we had the rat problem is gone now. The traps eventually rusted. The cleaning products got used. But there are still a few old things pushed behind paint cans and extension cords. One of them is a battered cardboard box. I should have thrown it away years ago. I'll get rid of that tonight, too. There's no reason to keep it anymore. It's funny. I used to think Cinna was a terrible name. Too dark. Too much history to place on an 8-pound dog's shoulders. I told Dana that once. Maybe I owe my wife an apology. Both of her girls always did love cinnamon. And while I wait for Dana to come home, I keep thinking about all the things I've told her over the years. It wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known. You loved her. There was nothing you could have done. I became good at saying those words. Maybe too good. Because the truth is that Dana always needed an answer. She needed the world to make sense again. After Sophie died, she couldn't accept that terrible things sometimes happened without anyone choosing them. She searched for a reason. Her family history. Sophie's heart. Going back to work. Every possibility became another way for Dana to blame herself. I watched it destroy her for years. Then Cinna came along. That tiny dog did what I couldn't. She gave Dana something alive to love, something that needed breakfast in the morning and a walk in the evening, something that didn't ask Dana to explain the past. For the first time in years, my wife stopped spending every day looking backward. She started looking forward. And then she opened that laptop. She updated her assume. She started checking her email. She talked about consulting, part-time work, something small. I told her it was okay. What else could I say? She looked happy. She looked like Dana again. The woman I'd met all those years ago. The woman who remembered birthdays and made reservations months ahead. The woman whose calendar looked like air traffic control. The woman who could turn a 20-minute work call into 2 hours without even noticing. I had spent years wanting her back. At least, I thought I had. But watching those ursums sitting on our kitchen table brought back memories I'd almost forgotten. Cold dinners, canceled Saturdays, the glow of her laptop late at night, the feeling that her office always received the best part of her and I got whatever remained. I remembered Sophie asleep against my chest at 7:42 while dinner went cold. I remembered Dana coming through the door and immediately talking about work. 5 weeks back, and they've already chained you to the desk. Don't start. I wasn't starting anything. At least that's what I told myself. There are things people do because they love someone, and there are things people do because they're afraid of losing them. Sometimes those things can look exactly the same. Dana will be home soon. I'll hear the front door. She'll probably look exhausted. Her shirt will be damp from the heat, and she'll have that stack of leftover flyers tucked under one arm. I'll tell her she needs to sit down. She'll refuse. I'll hand her the nearly frozen bottle of water anyway. I'll heat her dinner again. She'll probably ask whether any shelter's called. I'll tell her no. Then she'll check her phone. She'll search the neighborhood groups. She'll read comments from strangers saying they'll keep an eye out. Maybe someone will tell her not to give up. Dana won't. That's one thing about my wife. She doesn't give up easily. Tomorrow morning, if everything goes the way I expect, we won't need the flyers anymore. Someone will find Cinna, or Dana and I will find her ourselves. There will be tears, probably screaming. Dana might collapse, right there beside the road. I'll hold her. I'll tell her not to look too closely. I'll wrap Cinna in something and take care of whatever comes next. Dana will blame herself because the gate was open. I'll tell her it wasn't her fault. She'll say she should never have stepped inside to answer the phone. I'll tell her she couldn't have known. She'll ask whether Cinna was scared. I'll tell her it happened quickly. She'll ask whether Cinna was trying to come home. I'll say yes. Whatever she needs. Because I know my wife. I know what she needs. People might not understand that. They might look at certain choices from the outside and think they're cruel. But they don't know Dana. They didn't watch her disappear after Sophie. They didn't spend years wondering whether the woman they married would ever laugh again. They didn't see what Cinna gave back to her. I did. And I know I can do it again. It'll take time. Maybe months. Maybe longer. But Dana will recover. She'll stay home for a while. The laptop will probably disappear back into the closet. The Ursums are mostly gone already. 186 of them became missing dog flyers today. There's something almost comforting about that. Tomorrow, none of those things will matter. Not the job titles, not the promotions, not the awards, not the 11 years of experience printed neatly on expensive cream-colored paper. She'll need me, and I'll be here. I'll cook, I'll clean, I'll pay the bills. I'll sit with her through the nights when she can't sleep. I'll remind her that grief becomes smaller eventually. I'll tell her that people survive terrible things. I'll tell her she's stronger than she thinks. And when she asks me whether Cinna knew she loved her, I'll already know the answer. Yes. Always yes. Of course she knew. Dana should be coming around the corner any minute now. I should probably stop sitting here and get ready. There's still work to do tonight. The garage first, then the road, then the cabinet above the workbench, especially the old cardboard box hidden behind the paint cans and extension cords. I really should have thrown that away years ago. Dana asked me to. When we were preparing the house for Sophie, she asked me whether I'd gotten rid of the poison. I looked at my pregnant wife and told her yes. It was such a small lie at the time. At least that's what I told myself. The kind of lie married people tell because the truth would create an unnecessary argument. I'd already dealt with the rats. The poison was locked away. What difference did it make? And Dana worried too much. She always had. Sometimes loving someone means knowing which fears deserve attention and which ones don't. At least, that's what I used to think. Maybe I still do. The refrigerator just stopped humming. Without it, the house feels incredibly quiet. From where I'm sitting, I can see the kitchen counter covered in scraps of paper from the flyers. Tiny strips with Dana's phone number. Cinna's face looks up at me from the few pages we didn't finish cutting. That ridiculous Christmas sweater. One ear up, one ear folded. That permanently irritated expression. She really was a sweet dog. I want that to be clear. I loved her too. More than people would probably believe. She slept beside my leg on the couch. She followed me into the kitchen whenever I opened the refrigerator. Every morning, she stood outside the bathroom, waiting for me to finish showering, as if I'd been gone for several hours. When Dana was having a bad day, Cinna somehow seemed to know. She'd climb into Dana's lap and stay there. She was a good dog. Maybe that's why this has been harder than I expected. But sometimes, one terrible thing prevents another. Sometimes you have to choose between losing something now and losing everything later. Dana won't understand that. She doesn't need to. She just needs an answer she can survive. Tomorrow, she'll have one. The gate was open. Cinna escaped. She wandered onto the wrong road. A driver didn't see her. A terrible accident. Nothing more. Eventually, Dana will believe it. People believe what fits the world they already understand. And Dana understands loss. She understands guilt. She understands what it means to wish you'd done one small thing differently. She'll probably carry that guilt for a while. But I'll help her with it. I've had practice. I'll tell her the same things I told her after Sophie. It wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known. There was nothing you could have done. And this time, when I say those words, I'll make sure I don't hesitate. Because Dana notices hesitation. She notices everything. That's why I need to clean the garage carefully. That's why the cardboard box needs to disappear. That's why Cinna needs to be moved tonight. No questions, no uncertainty. Just an accident. Just another terrible thing that happened to us. Then, eventually, life will become quiet again. Maybe Dana will never go back to work. Maybe she will. Years from now, when she's truly ready. Maybe next time it won't take over everything. There's no reason to decide that tonight. Tonight I only need to take care of my wife. That's what I've always done. At least, that's how I choose to remember it. I love Dana, more than anything. And if someone heard this story without knowing her, they might misunderstand. They might think, Love should have stopped me. But love is exactly why I know what needs to happen next. Dana doesn't need another mystery. She doesn't need another unanswered question to spend years tearing apart. She needs something she can grieve, something she can eventually put behind her. An open gate, a little dog, a dangerous road, an accident, an answer. That's all. And tomorrow, when she breaks down, I'll be there to put her back together, just like before. The only difference is that this time I already know exactly what to say. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survive things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.